we'll switch it to the daily as well. I've also added an important moving average here. This is essentially the yearly moving average. And it's normally acted as a good level for Bitcoin to bounce off from. You do see that we have in the past, like last year August, we broke through it. But this is on the daily, so that was a wick, and then we obviously recovered. Same thing here where we when we had that 75k level that we touched, we fell through that moving average, but then obviously recovered quite quickly. And then I think it's been pretty much very similar since then. I mean, even if we look down here where this is going back to the bear market days, basically, when Bitcoin finally was reversing to the upside from the 17,000 level. And you can see that this moving average is quite important. You could see that it was struggling to push past it, and then eventually pushed and, kind of hovered quite a number of times around that moving average. We did obviously get a few candle closures at this point before, but then, since then, the moving average has held. Now, this obviously is slightly concerning. And it's not to say that we've started the bear market. I'm not gonna make that call to say that we have, because as usual there are key levels that need to be broken in order for me to say yes, there is a very good chance that we have started the bear market. This is still plausible that we do get to the 130, 150k region. But, it will start to become a lot more unlikely if we start breaking below, 83, 85k. Okay? Sorry, let me just check what's happening in the chat. Before 2023, it was trading below it. Yeah, so let's go back in time. Let's time travel a little bit. So you can see here. I mean, when we back in 2021, and I remember this is the first time I got completely wrecked and lost quite a fair bit of money, because this was basically when I joined crypto. Thinking that life was going to be great and crypto was the best, and literally joined when Bitcoin was 67k. That was fun because then it was just complete downtrend from there. So obviously you can see here that Bitcoin had broken through that moving average. You can actually see up here there was a huge wick where it recovered, but then it broke down from it, and it couldn't really maintain staying above it, and then this essentially was the bear market. The bear market was basically throughout 2022 to the early days of 2023. That was the bear market. So I would say that the moving average, the yearly moving average is quite an important moving average. I've not put it on the chart before, but I thought it would just be useful for people to see this. Now, as I said, I had a Bitcoin long trade a little bit higher. I did tell people to close break even because I think we're gonna possibly go for a slightly deeper correction. If people, in spot are scaling in at this point, 95, 96k, there's nothing wrong with that, right? Because this is also, I've taken it off the chart because we've touched it, but this is basically the 618 of an important level here. So, we are at an important level, but here, this is what I was trying to explain. We have the 786, which for me is kind of last resort. I would not want to see this broken. And obviously we've also got 100% fib extension and the 1.382 fib extension here, based on this downward momentum that we're having at the moment. So, Typical targets, I will say typical targets could be the 100% fib extension. We're not there yet. That is basically coming in at around $92,400. I would expect to see some reaction there if we get it. There is a chance that we have technically formed a low. It's just not looking plausible. I mean, and this is why I always say to people, right? In order to confirm that we have a low in place, typically, even on the smaller time frame, you want to see a 5-wave move to the upside, right? We haven't really had that at all. We've just basically been having like 3-wave move corrections throughout this whole entire throughout the past few months. We've just had 3-wave moves. That's all we've had. Like 3-wave move here and then fail. There's probably like quite a number of examples. I mean, if I zoom out a little bit and go to the 4-hour, if trading view is gonna load. So I don't know if it's trading view of my laptop that's being laggy, but I'm gonna probably just put it down to my laptop. Yeah, so come on. Right. So yeah, you can see that, we've had for instance some 3-wave move like this. For instance, is a 3-wave move. This is not a 5-wave move. This is, you can see here, like we basically failed to really properly get above that previous high. We were struggling here where we made an all-time high, but this again, this is not a 5-wave move. And if we really just kind of dig into current price action, or at least price action for the past month and a half or so, all of the upward moves have not really been 3-wave moves, 5-wave moves. They've all been 3-wave moves. And what I always say is, for at least some kind of confirmation that we've bottomed, I would like to see a 5-wave move up. I'm gonna just gonna get rid of that for now because it's kind of annoying me. But yeah, just 3-wave moves to the upside, like here for instance. If you can see, I'll try and highlight this a little bit better. Even on the smaller time scale, you can see that's a 3-wave move. It's not a 5-wave move. This is a 3-wave move. It's not a 5-wave move. So we've basically not really had any 5-wave moves to the upside. And for me to really say, okay, maybe we've bottomed on the lowest possible time frame, even if we get like a 3-wave like that, and then the final 4-5 pattern, and breaking above 100k, because we've lost 100k. 100k isn't particularly anything in terms of fibs, but it's a psychological level, right? 100k is a psychological level, and we've lost that. So I'm not seeing a confirmation of a low at present. That's just how it is. That's just literally what I'm seeing at the moment. And if we wanted to take a fib, and this is essentially what I've done. Come on, where are we? So we take the trend based fib. Now, it's a bit kind of difficult because, you could take this a couple of different ways. You can include the wick, or you can include this wick. I mean, I don't think it makes a huge difference. But if we did take, for instance, that lower wick, you can see that the 100% fib extension takes us to 92.5k. So that is with the assumption that this downside is essentially just an A wave. Sorry, 1 second. This is what happens when you have a touchpad instead of a mouse. An A wave, a B wave, and a C wave down. So that I would still class as a 3-wave move, and then you can kind of say that the third wave is it also has an A wave, a B wave. Although I have to admit, this was a very weak B wave for Bitcoin. It was a little bit disappointing it was that weak. And then we get the final C wave move to the downside. And typically the A wave and the C wave are of similar lengths. And you know, if we were to take that with the idea that, you know, the 100% fib level is kind of the target at this point, just adjust that a little bit, you can see that does take us around to the 92k, 91k level. I'm not saying that we'll stop if we get there, but what I am expecting is that this is basically the zone, and I'm gonna make this a little bit more obvious, just like I do up here, where I say this is the sell zone for Bitcoin. For me, this is kind of like this is where we are gonna want to see some reaction. We're gonna want to see some reaction on Bitcoin, because if we don't, then that'll be quite worrying. I would genuinely expect to see buyers come in at the zone if we get down there. And I know it sounds crazy, right, that, you know, we were at 126k like, you know, barely a month ago, and we basically dropped what, 25%, 30%, something like that. But this correction is still a baby correction in my opinion. Yeah, we've dropped basically 25%. If you look at previous corrections, even when we corrected from, remember that time we hit like 106k or whatever it was, back in like February or January, where was it? Was it here? Yeah. So here, for instance, we hit 109k, right? And we corrected, and I remember posting this on the chat. You know, we all thought the same thing, us analysts. I remember speaking to Night Ranger about this as well. This was an area here. This was a weekly, you know, resistance flipped support zone, and there was an expectation that we would get that retest, and we did. But if you look at the extent of that correction, it's basically about 33%. You know, we can take another example. We can take, you know, this example where we made all-time high back in March last year, and we went to about 49k, I think it was. What's that? 33%. So 33% here, 32% here, 25% here. So, you know, I still think that we could go lower, you know. And if we did drop lower, if we did drop, you know, like the total coming to about 33%, that literally takes us perfectly to the 786 or the 1.382. So don't be surprised if we do obviously get to 92k. That's first kind of, well, it's second major fib level, because right now we're at a major fib level. We're at the 618. But if we do drop further, 92k is next, but then the really big zone is going to be the 86 to 83, 84k level. Okay. There is going to be a lot of liquidity here. There's going to be a lot of buy orders here. You know, and also if we look on the RSI, right? So I bang on about this a lot. Daily RSI on Bitcoin, you don't see it often. Okay, you see it a couple of times a year. But when you do see it, you got to take that opportunity. This is literally what I was telling people when Bitcoin was at 75k. Or 77k, sorry. So we were at 77k, around there, 78, 77k. And we were massively oversold. Now, buying Bitcoin at that level is not a crazy thing to do. It doesn't necessarily mean the low is in at that point, but it means that we're very, very close. So buying spot at this level was not a crazy thing to do. Because if you look, we did go down a little bit lower, a few thousand lower, to like 75. But if you look at the RSI, we weren't as oversold. Okay, and this is bullish divergence, basically, is what you were seeing here on the daily, and that is a very powerful indicator that we are possibly reversing, and you know, the rest is history, right? We saw what happened when Bitcoiners was at 75k. You know, it went up 68, 69%, which is crazy. Same thing here, right? We haven't even oversold on the daily yet. I'm not even calling this oversold yet. So, you know, it is possible that what we see is we get to 92k, Bitcoin becomes oversold, we have a little bit of a recovery, and then, you know, we have a very small recovery, and then we might potentially go lower. We might go into the 83 to 86k region, but the daily RSI might not be as oversold. Now, if that is the case, that's going to be your buy signal, right? And it might, I'm not saying it will be, but it might be the last opportunity in this cycle to get a good gain from Bitcoin. You know, the cycle could be over. It could be over. For me anyway, you know, the target was 133k to 150, 160k. We got to 126k. So for me, you know, if we started a bear market right now, you know, I'm going to be like, cool, you know, I mean, Bitcoin basically rallied for a couple of years from 17k to 126k. Like, what more can we ask for? I mean, that was Bitcoin's bull market, right? Alts, obviously, some of them have rallied really well. Solana was at $9, went to like what, $300, something like that. I mean, that rallied ridiculously well as well, right? So I've said this before, people can't complain that we haven't had a good bullish market. We have. Whether we've had proper full-blown alt season, I mean, you know, some alts had really good runs. I remember when Sue was literally at like, you know, 30, 50 cents, whatever it was, and it went up to like $4. Higher, I think, I can't remember. But, you know, coins have 10x'd. They have 10x'd during this cycle. You know, I mean, we kind of got given what we asked for, right? So we might be in the last part of this cycle. And I still predict that if we do turn around in this zone here and we get higher, I do predict that, you know, April, maybe May, that's kind of when we're gonna max out at that point. You know, and I think, you know, maybe late 2026, 2027 will be the bear market. But we'll see how that goes. So all eyes on Bitcoin at the moment, of course. You know, we've got our entries that I've sent you guys on the signals set. You know, if we get our fills, that's something that I think we should be looking to hold for as long as we're holding above this level, basically. Ethereum, I'll touch on Ethereum. Just waiting for it to load. I should have loading music playing with this laptop. Okay. We're getting there. Binance chart. Yes, please. It doesn't lag this hard when I'm not streaming, so I'm just going to put it down to Discord and QuickTime running at the same time. It's probably too much for it. Okay. Let's see if this is going to open. Okay, it's open. So, this was a funny one, right? Because I did kind of hope that we would get a slightly higher B wave than we did, but you know, it seems like the B wave just wanted to get to about $3,600, and it didn't want to get higher than that, which, you know, it is what it is. It's a bit disappointing because I think the general idea was correct. My time estimations on how fast things move, it normally doesn't work out too well, because I always say, well, I might draw a line and then it's just all taken place within like a week. I forget how fast crypto moves sometimes. Definitely does move a lot faster than stocks. But you know, here is an example with Ethereum. Yearly EMA. You can see here around May this year we were bouncing around it. Push through. Retest. B wave. Falling through. So, you know, could this be possibly that we are playing the C wave out? Maybe. At the moment, the A wave and the C wave are the same length, so you could call it a flat correction if Ethereum decides to turn around now. Again, though, I'm just not seeing it right now. I'm just not seeing any substantial price action that can really tell me, yes, we've bottomed. You know, I still personally think that we may go a little bit lower. If we go back to the daily, you know, Ethereum hasn't oversold yet. The positive side of it is that when we were at the same price, you know, a week or so ago, which was at around $3,000, the RSI was almost oversold, and now the RSI is not as oversold. Okay, so there is some level of bullish divergence, but it's minimal at the moment. And I would not be surprised if we did get some kind of retest around this level here, this $2,700, $2,800 level. I think there is a good likelihood that we get there. I mean, it obviously all depends if, you know, this low is in, and, you know, we kind of just go up from here. For us to really confirm that there is a low in place, I would want to see us break above this B wave here at $3,600. So I think if we break above this level here, then, you know, maybe we can say, okay, possible first indication that we've bottomed. But again, we have nothing here. There is nothing here to tell us that a low is in place. And, you know, I would definitely remain super cautious at this point. But there is no problem, you know, kind of chipping away a little bit at some spot positions. You know, we're kind of in a region here where, yeah, a low is definitely forming, and, you know, as I've said, complete invalidation of the upside would be if we break below $2,000. If we draw the fib, yeah, you can see $2,100, which is basically where this B wave low formed. That obviously is complete invalidation at that point. But what you typically would want to possibly see is you would want to see a bounce from the 50% to the 618. Now we're at the 50%. If you look at this, we're at the 50%. We've tested it twice now. It might not hold. We still have a fair value gap technically to fill in here. And I think it would look quite neat if we get to the 618. I genuinely think it would look neat. I think this would be quite a nice end to the correction. And, you know, you can see that this is like wave 1, wave 2, and wave 3. That'll be quite nice to see. Let me just check the fib levels for a second. Just taking, yeah, that's fine. So this is kind of like, yeah, I mean, I would probably say that this is basically still a 3-wave move, and this here is kind of your fourth wave. It's a bit long for a fourth wave. Typically a fourth wave and a second wave, or they're kind of the same length. The fourth wave is definitely a little bit longer than the second wave, but it's fine. It's still technically valid. But I think in the coming days, I wouldn't say weeks, I would say coming days, we should hopefully in this region start seeing things turn around a little bit. But yeah, I mean, 786 would be quite deep. It wouldn't completely invalidate, and as I said to you, we need to get a break below this B wave low around $2,100 for it to be completely invalidated. But I would preferably want it to hold at least a 618. And I think you can get some really, really good spot bids on Ethereum. So, buying Ethereum now, not a bad idea. You can chip in at it a little bit. And we can target this zone, right? We can target this $6,000, $7,000 region. But this is basically it. We would have our entry possibly just below here. Hang on, sorry. Why is this? This is being weird. No, I don't want my stops to be that. Let's just put it at 1,800 just so I can actually see. Okay, that's kind of weird. I'm not entirely sure why it's that color. It's a bit confusing. It's typically red for me. But anyway, TradingView likes to change color sometimes. Anyway, so yeah, basically an entry around this level, but I would be cheeky and try to get an entry just maybe above that 618. So maybe at $2,850 for Ethereum. But yeah, of course, we might have a DCA where these previous lows are here. So that's like $2,300, somewhere around there. We would have a DCA. I'm just going to put that in around about here. But then obviously our stops, we can have a daily stop below this B wave. So entry here, maybe $2,800. DCA around $2,360. DCA is obviously going to be a bit bigger in terms of position size, and then obviously we've got our stops below that B wave. And yeah, I would be targeting this for a nice 5 RR around $7,000. And I think, that'll be it at that point. I mean, I would like Ethereum to go higher, but I think it'll be a big ask. I think it'll be a really big ask to expect Ethereum to go a lot higher than $6,000-$7,000. I think people should be happy if we get to that point. I mean, even at least you'd be getting like a 2x, 2.5x. I have spent a considerable amount of time banging on about Bitcoin and a little bit of time banging on about Ethereum. So let's go through some large market cap alts. So Solana, yeah, I mean, currently in a Solana short, not closing it. Set up entry, of course, trimmed some profit from that, so that was nice. I'm glad we caught that because I was starting to see the market was getting ready to shit the bed, and it did. And I was looking for coming up to this like $175, $177 region, but we didn't get it. And what's funny, I mean, we basically bounced off of this EMA here on the 1 hour. So I mean, that was an interesting retest. We basically just bounced off of that. So at least we kind of got in, I think it was a bit lower than this, to be fair. I think we got in around about 152, 151, something like that. Whatever it was decent. Like we got a good drop on this. We took some good profits. So I mean, you know, I still see that we could go down a little bit further. Um, I am still technically targeting that $122 region, but again, I wouldn't really want to see us go really too much lower than that. I think that would kind of be our low. I'd like to think that would be our low. Um, you know, and it would be good to possibly try and flesh out a long trade setup at that point. Um, and yeah, again, if we see this like as an ABC to the downside, where the A wave is a very similar length to the B wave, I mean, yeah, you can see that basically is going to take us to that 122 that I said would be our final TP, which is essentially just below that swing low. And obviously you've got some confluence here as well. You can see this was acting as support, this was acting as support, this was acting as support. So yeah, this kind of 117, 123, that is like a major level of support for Solana. I mean, thing is, you know, you look at it on the weekly though, and we look at it like this, you can see that we've broken the weekly uptrend. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that a bear market has started for Solana, but it is a warning sign. It is a warning sign that we could possibly be close to a top. And, you know, even if we recover and we break back over this trend line and, you know, we get back to $250, or we get back to the projected all-time high that I had at around 300 and something dollars, this still is an indicator of some weakness. It is an indicator that we may be close to beginning a bear market. When I say close, I mean within like a 6 to 9 month period. I think the market is slowing down at this point. And we might just only have one more proper leg up in it. So we'll monitor Solana. We're in a short at the moment, so we'll keep watching it. I don't expect it to all of a sudden turn around and start doing, you know, 30-40% gains, but we'll obviously keep watching, see what happens, see if we get close to the $122 region. That'll be kind of nice. Link. So I'll probably talk about Link, maybe Doge, the usual suspects, for the remainder of this. On Binance, this is probably going to look a little bit different. I think the low on Binance obviously was like $8, which was pretty tragic. If we look at how this looks on Coinbase, I'm just curious, because I know Binance had much lower lows. Yeah, so if we look at Coinbase, you know, Link doesn't even look like it budged. And more importantly, on Coinbase, it hasn't broken the weekly level. So I just wanted to show you guys that, just for the sake of basically saying that we're still within this yearly triangle. It's kind of like a triangle. We can call it a triangle. It's kind of a yearly triangle. A yearly triangle, really. It spans across basically the entirety of Link's existence. You know, so you can quite easily see that we have this range that it's basically been in within this triangle. So, you know, it's difficult to say, are we going to break out of it? I really hope we don't. I hope this wick, obviously on Binance, was just it was just a blip. I mean, Atom went to 0 on Binance, so I'm not trusting anything Binance related. That's why I kind of am ignoring everything that happened on the 10th of October when it comes to the Binance chart. But yeah, I mean, for me, Link at the moment is a really, really good buy. If you really want to try and get the bottom for Link, we've got basically, I'd say like $12.50 maybe, $12.3. And that I think, scaling now would be absolutely nothing wrong with scaling in now. But if you're really, really trying to catch the bottom, then the 786 fib is basically taking you to $13. So if you wanted to buy Link at $13, that's not a bad idea. But if we start seeing a break below $12.33, and we sustain a break below that, and we can't get back above this weekly trend line, and we have a candle closure outside of the weekly trend line, that for me is like a massive, massive red flag. That's like a big indication that we aren't going to possibly recover. So for me, if we start buying here and then we get like a breakdown to like, $9 or $10 or something crazy like that on the weekly candle, and we can't close back above it, then if we did buy here at that point, I'd be looking at closing the spot trade, to be honest, because I think there is a possibility that Link and everything else really ultimately could be going into a bear market. And not to be super, super, super bearish, but something like this is a real scenario. I mean, it is a real possibility that we get something like this, where we get down to $3, So I think we need to be careful. I think we need to just be realistic and play with the levels. You've got levels. Don't buy and then think, oh, we're at $10, it's fine. We're gonna go back up. I'm gonna just like put my whole life savings into it. And then, we get to like $7 and you're still thinking, yeah, this is great. This is like bargain prices. I'm going to put tons of money into it, because we can just keep going down, all the way down. Okay. So funny enough, I'm not going to talk too much about Link, but I mean, to be honest, this has very, very good RR. It's very, very good RR. We basically, if we take an entry at around $13 and we hold this for the long term, so I mean, for me, first TP is going to be around $27, $28. This is spot, of course. You want to take this on leverage, you can, by the way, because stop loss is tight as hell, but it'll definitely be like a swing trade. This is not going to be a 5-minute thing. So yeah, first TP is going to be around $27, $28. And then, next TP is going to be at around previous all-time highs, right, at $50. So already on spot, you're talking like a 4x if we even got there, which is, to be honest, amazing. We're just going to talk about Doge and then probably call it there because my throat is like dying. Okay. So yeah, Doge looks super, super juicy. Really, really, really juicy. I mean, I've been eyeing this shot for a long time. Long time. And we have this trend line that we've basically been adhering to. So obviously on the 10th of October, again, this is Binance chart. It was cheeky and kind of like swept liquidity down here. Super cheeky. I mean, that's like super grimy move. But it is what it is. But we might get a little bit low on Doge. So we might get to like 14 cents. If we get anywhere near that, again, for me, this is like a buy zone. So if I just adjust this a little bit. Yeah. So I think fundamentally we're close. I think fundamentally we're close. We're close to a low forming, I think, on most altcoins. I think maybe we get like a 10%, maybe 15% move down further, but I don't really see us going lower than that. I mean, to be honest, 15% would be insane. I think we may get 10% max lower on alts, but I think that's it. I think that's going to be like bargain price, premium entry, as they call it. And yeah, Doge, I mean, look at it. You get it at 14 cents. Your stop loss is basically, you know, if we set stops just below that trend line to like, I mean, what's that? 13.5 cents. I mean, and you know, I would personally be targeting Doge. I've said this before. I would be targeting Doge all the way up to 48 cents. That's literally a 21 reward to risk ratio. That's insane. Like, you literally would barely lose money and gain a hell of a lot if you held all the way to 48 cents. So this is definitely one of my favorites in terms of how juicy it looks. You know, I do think that if Bitcoin recovers and, you know, say we get 87, 90K Bitcoin and Doge does get down to around 14, 15 cents and Bitcoin recovers and Bitcoin, for instance, goes to 150K, Doge is going to 48 cents. Like, for me, I'm pretty confident that we would see that happen. But you know, these are the setups I'm looking at the moment. You know, I think with the weekend coming up, we might see some consolidation. We might see a little bit of relief, not huge. I don't think we'll see a huge relief. If we break above 100K and we get a 5-wave move from Bitcoin, that might be an indication that low is in. But I think we're going to have some consolidation over the weekend, maybe drop slightly further. But then I think that's really it. I think at that point, I would really like to see the end of this correction at that point. And then maybe we have a good end of November / Christmas. So let's see how we go. I might show you guys one more thing before my voice dies, and if my laptop will allow it, is USDT dominance. Now, I'm still not hugely bearish on USDT dominance. You know, I've talked about this trend line when it loads up. I've talked about this trend line for a long time. It is something that obviously concerns me. Seeing USDT dominance as bullish as it is does concern me. But, you know, there's a couple of ways you could look at this. I mean, I've drawn this trend line here, but there is a couple of different ways you can look at this. So, you know, if you wanted to, you can maybe look at this as a triangle. Something like this. You know, and we are technically very close to the trend line here on USDT dominance. I think pretty much at it really. So if we see a drop down on USDT dominance, then that would obviously be a big relief for Bitcoin, and it would be a big relief for alts. And then we could possibly see a bounce, and then we get alt season. I don't particularly see this playing out like that, but it is obviously optimistic. But, you know, it is just something to kind of be a little bit aware of, that, you know, this is a little bit kind of undecided at the moment where we might go, but we have broken above this trend line that I did draw. And, you know, USDT dominance has been on an uptrend, and then we had this kind of corrective price action here. I know it's kind of difficult to take, you know, EMAs to heart when it comes to something that isn't technically something that you could trade, but we can see that we have got the yearly EMA here, bounced off of it a few times. So I think we need to just watch what's going to happen. Maybe we'll get another retest of that EMA and we'll get some relief for alts and Bitcoin. But in the meantime, I think, as I said, we just need to stay cautious, preserve our capital, and I think very soon we can obviously deploy some capital into our spot bags, but let's just see what happens over the weekend. Basically, no rushing on this. Let me jump to the Discord group because I think my throat is dying now. Just read what JJ said. When we're in the range of 109-ish, wasn't the talk in general that we have to drop lower to get above? But when it happens like this, kind of makes us panic. Yeah, I mean, that's the thing, right? You know, nothing can go up forever. And corrections are healthy. You know, corrections are healthy. I worry when I see very shallow pullbacks, unless we're like in a super impulsive upside momentum. I worry when we just see shallow pullbacks, but we see it like for a long period of time, because when you look at, for instance, the RSI, you will start to notice that we're getting bearish divergence, because things can't go up and up forever. It just doesn't work like that. So personally, I think this is a pretty healthy correction on Bitcoin. You know, we're at the 618 at the moment. We're kind of just hovering there. It makes sense that we're hovering there. If we get a bit lower, again, nothing wrong with that. So we have the levels, right? We've had 34% corrections before and then gone to the moon. So this is nothing I'm super concerned about at the moment. But, you know, I think over time, and if we look at it on the weekly, and I drew this because I find this bearish divergence on the RSI very, very important. I do think that we may get one more push to the upside. That might be where Bitcoin tops, 150k, but RSI is only, you know, 65. Bearish divergence, that might be it. But we have to see. Bitcoin is still not technically oversold on the daily. I do want to see it get a little bit lower before I'm like, okay, cool, this is it. Like, this is the thing that happens once or twice every year. You know, this is a good opportunity. Anyway, I think I've lost my voice now. So I really appreciate you guys coming to the stream. I hope that was informative. As usual, I'm obviously going to upload this onto YouTube as soon as possible. But yeah, you know, as I said, stay safe, preserve your capital. Opportunities come all the time, you know. I don't want people thinking there's missed opportunities. There's never missed opportunities in crypto. There's always some craziness going on. So, you know, we're chill right now. We've got a Bitcoin long set up. Should be out of that at the moment, but we've got a Bitcoin long set up, and we've got our Sol short that we're just chilling in. We'll just see how it goes, see what Bitcoin wants to do, and no full porting. No full porting at the moment. And a lot of these are going to be spot buys. But if you want to do leverage, remember, you can do leverage, just be careful on your position size, which is like basically the most important thing if you're going to use leverage. Anyway, really appreciate joining, guys. Have a good rest of the weekend, and see you next week. Peace out.